You've probably heard the headlines screaming that Qatar is getting a military base in America. But here's what's actually happening. And although it is still dramatic, it is still unprecedented, it may not be as crazy as you initially thought. The US just announced that Qatar will establish a dedicated Air Force training facility at the Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. It's a US state. Just to clarify, this isn't Qatar getting its own independent base that they can operate on American soil, like the American base Al Udeid in Qatar, which basically is just American sovereign territory, but in Qatar. No, it's not like that. It's a Qatari contingent operating within the US controlled base in Idaho to train pilots on American supplied F 15 fighter jets. So it's like Qatari pilots are being trained here, basically. So nowhere near as dramatic, nowhere near as powerful as the US bases in the Arab states, for example. That's the news. Very short. Bye. I'll see you on the next one. But here's the analysis if you care and want to stick around. First, orange juice, check. I do love me some orange juice, not gonna lie. Delightfully tangy. Have you ever played a PlayStation or Xbox? Anyone with younger siblings, basically, or cousins, knows that the moment when you're trying to play a game, especially if it's a multiplayer game, and the kid also wants to play, you're like, oh, wow, what a disruption. So you give them a controller, right? Now, if they're just about the right age, they can hold the controller, they can sit up, right? They're old enough, maybe a few years, but they're not smart enough, they're not aware enough yet to understand that that controller's turned off. It doesn't control anything. It's not a two-player game, my G. you've been duped. This is basically what came to my mind when I heard about this so-called Qatari base in the US. It's the American way of saying, we're so sorry we looked the other way and didn't warn you or stop the missile in any way whatsoever when Israel attacked Qatari sovereign territory. You know how it is when you're bought and paid for by a foreign entity. Anyway, here's a controller, right? You have control now, okay? You've got the power, you've got the prestige. We haven't given this controller to anyone else. Ooh. Anyway, I'll upgrade you guys. I'll upgrade your battle pass or your season pass, right? I mean your defense subscription to silver tier from bronze tier, and you can come train your pilots with our American bad boys, eh? On the homeland. You're welcome. You're welcome, Qatar. No. It's okay. It's okay. I don't need a second jet. It's okay. I don't need a second jet. It's like if Xbox gave you a free month to play games on their console because you're training on American fighter pilots. So, you know. Now, this deal drops just after Qatar brokered the Gaza ceasefire agreement. A deal which means if Israel keeps to it, it means Israel has failed to wipe out the armed resistance in Gaza. That was one of their, it could be argued, their main primary objective, at least stated, that we will wipe out the resistance forces in Gaza and take full control. They failed, okay? And it may mean, this ceasefire may mean aid gets into the people of Gaza who desperately need it and from whom aid has thus far been withheld. We're talking about a civilian population who has had food and medicine and basic necessities restricted from them. I've got some, $7,000 receivers, right? Some Hasbara agents of Spin that say, if we've been told that Gaza has plenty of food, it's just that the resistance forces take the food and they don't distribute it. But food's allowed in, it's completely open. If that narrative was correct, just a side note, there's loads of Hasbara that we won't unpack because their job is to delay and confuse, and then by the time you fully address it, the news has moved on, the reality has moved on to something else. But I'll address this briefly. International aid organizations, including the United Nations organization components. The United Nations is not blindly pro-Palestine. Far from it. The United Nations main funder is the US. Or was. Now things are slowly changing. Even the United Nations says Israel's not letting us deliver the aid. So who do you follow? All the international aid organizations, the United Nations, and the majority of countries in the world, or Israel? Who are you going to follow? Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? Anyway, now the real question is: will these gestures by America to Qatar, will it keep Gulf states and other Middle East regional powers who are tied in some way, who are under the American sphere of influence to some degree, will it keep them confident that America is the right protector for them, or is it too little too late? Did one Israeli attack on Qatari soil? Oh my God. Did one Israeli attack on Qatari soil change everything in terms of perception of how reliable a protector the US is? That's the question. I personally, my assessment is things will never be the same again. Not after the attack on Qatar, and of course, not after the 2 year engineered crisis in Gaza by Israel. There is no going back. As Caesar once said, the die is cast. He's crossed the Rubicon. Look up that phrase if you've not heard it before, crossing the Rubicon. The die has been cast, the decisions have been made, and things have been set into motion. Geopolitics is usually slow burning, publicly slow burning, slow details, and then in a span of a few days or weeks, things really pop off. It's like an earthquake that builds up tension, then goes quah, and then you get like a Richter 8, a magnitude 8 on the Richter scale earthquake as the plates shift into a new tension reducing position. That's how geopolitics is. Obviously, I relate to you the stuff a lot of the time that's happening underneath, not just the public stuff. That's what the analysis is. And I'm telling you, by my assessment, there's no going back. There's no track to normalization that looks anything like, for Israel, anything like what they could have hoped for, expected even 2 years ago. The whole situation is changed, the whole landscape, and we'll go through it eventually. The masks are off for the US to some extent, for Israel to a great extent, and some masks are still on, but they may come off. Turkey, Egypt, Iran, what are they capable of, right? Saudi Arabia, the other Gulf monarchies, Jordan, what are they willing to do? There's loads of masks being worn here. Everyone's looking at each other like, is it the time? Are we gonna? And they're not all in cahoots. They're not all working together. The regional powers in the Middle East. But if you've got an absolute nutter state, eventually people might look at each other and be like, I know we've got beef, but this guy's willing to set the whole house on fire. Are we sure we want to squabble over who has the bigger bedroom when this guy is ready to light the match for the whole thing? Everything under the roof is gone. Are we sure? That's basically where it's getting into. Anyway, time will tell, and I will keep you posted on the news and the analysis, unbiased and of course without the Western spin. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mahfouz, or NewsBaba, and I'll see you on the next one.